You are now tuned into the truth frequency.
We are TFR. TFR.
Truth Frequency Radio.
Welcome to Spirit's Journey, coming to you live on Truth Frequency Radio and simulcast on Oneness Talk Radio. Your hosts are Patrick and Catherine Andrews.
Join us each week as we explore a wide range of metaphysical topics such as dreams, astrology, intuitive readings, and life purpose. You'll receive practical guidance so that you can live your most awesome life.
Learn more about what we do at intuitiveschool.com and connect with us on Facebook at Spirit's Journey Radio. Hello and welcome to Spirit's Journey. We are coming to you live on Truth Frequency Radio, your protection from deception, and simulcast on Oneness Talk Radio. You can also find us live on iHeartRadio, TuneIn, and TalkStream Live. We are here in the Heartland, holding the energy for spiritual truth and awareness. I'm Patrick.
And I'm Catherine. Welcome, everyone. So, sorry we sound a little off today. We share everything in our marriage, including our sicknesses. So Patrick got a cold, and now I've got it. So we're going to do our best, and we have an awesome guest today, Michael Ryce, who is coming to us live.
All right. Hi, Michael.
Hey, guys. Nice to be here.
Excellent. Yeah, we are very glad to have you. And it's been a little while since we've worked together, but we've known you for a long time and really respect your work. And we look forward to getting into that today. So, as they say, the show must go on. So
there you go. It's probably been, 15 years since I was up in where you had your center in near Chicago?
It might have been. Years. It might have been, yeah. Mm-hmm. For those of you that may not know, we used to have a school called the School of Intuitive Arts and Sciences up in Chicago, and we ran that for about 15 years up there until we moved to Kansas. And so we've been moving our classes and our services online since then, and traveling a little bit more to other centers.
So, Michael, before we delve into some cool questions for you, do you want to just kind of you have a really unique metaphysical perspective on the work that you do. Do you just kind of want to give the guests an outline of, the focus of your work?
Sure. Well, my background is in electronics with a side study in physics. And when I went into studying naturopathy, became a naturopathic physician, what became clear to me in the study of medicine was that what I was studying were energy fields and energetic principles. And when I found the Aramaic language back about 40 years ago, it became clear to me, and it is the root language of at least 6 of the world's major religions. And when I first tapped into translations based in the original meaning of its words, it was clear to me that this was not a theological language, but rather was a physics language. It was a psychological language. It was a genetic language. It was a physiological language. And, when you think of metaphysics, in the ancient understanding of physics, there was something that was beyond it. We now know with quantum physics that it's all just physics. The truth is there's nothing beyond physics. It is just the operation of physics from the quantum leap on up to what comes out of our mouths. I was inspired by the fact that the last 6 days I was in utero. My mother had toxemia, and they gave her Pitocin for 6 days straight, trying to get me out of there. And as I was being born, they contacted my father and said, you better get in here if you want to see your son alive, because he's not going to make it through the night. And 3 or 4 times in that first year of my life, I was almost dead. I lived the next 25 or so years on an inhalator and pills. Every summer every fall when it came time to go back to school, I went back to the hospital in an oxygen tent. I never went to school the first couple of weeks. It was always hospital time. And I realized that while these drugs and all these miraculous things they were giving me perhaps were keeping me alive, they were killing me. And that began a search. What is real healing? What's it all about, really? And so that was where I started. And today I'm the director of a foundation that's translating a copy of the oldest known New Testament in its original Aramaic language into English. And, there's a comment that comes out of Vladimir Lenin, probably responsible for more deaths on planet Earth than any other human being in history. And he says that if you want to destroy a culture, you change the meaning of its words. Virtually every important word that was spoken in the Aramaic language, when it was translated into Greek, had its meaning changed. The man Yeshua, and they even changed his name. They call his name Jesus, but it isn't. It's Yeshua. If Yeshua sat in most churches in the Western world today, he'd say, "That's all Greek to me." He was a physicist. He was a physiologist. He was a geneticist. And when you go back to the original meanings of the words, now you look at the Greek meanings and it gets kind of crazy, but you look at the Aramaic meanings and it all makes absolute sense. Patrick, we were speaking just before we started the show. You mentioned people in resistance to the truth. Mm-hmm. And if you go back to the Aramaic language, the word Satan is not about this dude with a red suit, a tail, and a pitchfork. The word Satan means the resistor, one who misleads. Now, you look at the average person in trauma today and you say, have you noticed that you've been through that 87 different times with 42 different people? And you're the only one that was there every time. Maybe this is about you. And the response is, no, wait a minute, let me tell you what's really going on. And then they'll tell you a story about someone else. So they'll go into resistance to the truth, and they've got somebody to blame. They're misled. So most people today are living quite literally in the Aramaic meaning of the word Satan, in resistance and being misled by the perceptual output of their own minds. And this whole body of work that I've developed over the last 50 years is about correcting the perceptual output of the mind and learning to experience ourselves not as the bodies pictured by our minds based in all the messages we've received from our generational patterns and from the people in our lives, but rather to experience ourselves as who we are. And the way I define who we are is I just invite people to hold a newborn child. And if there's anybody in the audience that's ever held a newborn, I invite you to just take a moment and remember back when you held that newborn. And then if you were to tap into the essence of the newborn and put a word to or describe its essence, what would it be? Now, Jeannie, my wife, and I have asked that question of tens of thousands of people all over the globe. And 100% of the time, the answer is always some variation on the theme of love. And my offering to people is, there it is. That's what we are. The reason everybody describes their newborns that way is because we are created this essence of love. And what tends to happen is we come into the world, and the world beats it out of us as quickly as possible. And then it gives us a message that what we need to do is go out and find somebody to love us, which leads to crazy time. You might remember the song a few years ago, looking for love in all the wrong places, looking for love in too many faces. And everybody who's lost contact with the truth of who they are is out there looking for somebody to fulfill them. And then, of course, if I can't get the love I want from you, which is an absolute, total, complete impossibility, then I'm going to tend to take whatever patterns are in my mind, make them about you, blame you, find a reason to get rid of you, and on we go into the insanity of the culture.
So that's relationships in a nutshell.
That's relationship in a nutshell, exactly. People tend, when you think of it in terms of physics and resonating energy fields, people tend to attract what they are in relationship, which means that most people are in relationship with those who have matching bags of garbage. And the world calls those love relationships. You notice the divorce rate today is somewhere in the 60% arena, and probably at least 38% of the other 40%. They really divorced decades ago. They live under the same roofs. They call themselves married, but they really aren't. And so this work is about restoring our relationship with who we are ourselves, recognizing others as who they are, the same essence that we are, and reconnecting to that. And one of my favorite quotes from Einstein, he says, if you think you're separate or separated from the rest of humanity, you're living in an optical delusion. And the optical delusions are created by the perceptual mind. And so the tool is to collapse perception and give us a taste of who we are is what this work is all about. There's my elevator speech for today. It'll probably change tomorrow, but that's it for today.
Well, that was amazing. I've always been fascinated with your study of the Aramaic, and some of my understanding of the translations of the Gospels that most scholars go back to is the Greek translations, like what you were talking about. And my understanding is that they were about 300 years after Jesus' life, which just happens to be about the time that Constantinople was convening councils, like the Council of Nicaea, for example. So why do you think the scholars keep going back to those historic Greek translations instead of trying to find works that are actually in Jesus' native tongue?
Well, if you're stuck in Satan, if you're stuck in the resistor, one who misleads, then you're misled into searching somewhere where the answer isn't. There's an interesting passage in the scriptures where, and again, this is not theology. If people are listening who have theological ideas around what I'm saying, I'm going to just invite everybody to drop the theology at the moment and just take a look and see. Is this physics, physiology? Is it science? Is it psychology? Is it genetics? And I'll offer, when you start looking through those eyes, when you start having the eyes to see and the ears to hear, that's what it's all about in the Aramaic. But there's an interesting passage where there are a number of disciples beyond the 12 that we hear about most commonly, and they come together with Yeshua, and they're kind of like, how do we do this thing you're doing? You function differently than everybody. How do we do that? And Yeshua answers them, and we'll talk about his answer in a minute. But after he gives his answer, half of his disciples get up and leave. And their comment is, too hard a saying. What's that all about? Well, in essence, he was saying we need to be restored to our relationship with love and to live as love, which means, AB, you can't be screwing around with the neighbor's wife anymore. You got to stop that. And AB, you got to stop cheating your employees. And by the way, Dave over there, you can't steal from those people down the street anymore. And those guys were like, wait a minute, that's how we make our livelihood. Too hard a saying, we're out of here. And they leave, and they never come back. Now, I'd offer that's the faction that made up what we call Greek theology today. The easy, we just say magic words about this magic man, and then our lives are all taken care of. That's not what Yeshua said. He said there's work to be done. Now, if we look at the actual response he gave them, and the response is translated from the Aramaic fairly accurately, but it's an idiom, and the problem with an idiom is you can't translate an idiom. So if you read that passage where they're asking him that question and half of his audience leaves saying too hard a saying, his answer as to what they need to do is, you must eat my body and drink my blood. Now, the Greeks translate that as well. You got to go to communion. So that's it. That's the championship thing you have to do, and then everything gets rectified in your life. Well, actually, eat my body. If that were it, obviously, half of his audience would have left saying, too hard a saying. I mean, what's hard about that? Take a little wine, a little wafer. Hey, we just had lunch. What's wrong with that? But if you look at what that idiom means, to eat my body and drink my blood, and it's an idiom that's still alive in the Aramaic language today, it means that you've got to inculcate and incorporate everything that I'm teaching you into your life, into your behavior, into your thinking. And you've got to live it. Too hard a saying. We're out of here. So that idiom, let's say, imagine that I were the best, I'm the best cabinet maker in the world. I mean, I make the finest, most beautiful, most elegant cabinets anybody has ever seen. And somebody comes to me and says, Michael, how do I make cabinets like you do? If I were Aramaic, I would say, you've got to eat my body and drink my blood. You've got to know everything I know about different types of wood and how to put them together and how to dowel and how to shave and how to cut and how to match grain. You've got to know all of that.
Wow. So that's a completely different perspective.
Too much work. Yeah, too much work. We're out of here.
Well,
and then came this easy. All you have to do is say the magic name. Not what Yeshua said. He said there's work to be done. And the work, the primary work I would offer is the work of forgiveness. Now, here's another place where, Vladimir Lenin's statement comes in: change the meaning of a word, you destroy a culture. We've been taught that forgiveness, the Greeks tell us, of course, there's somebody else out there that's responsible for your pain. It's all their fault, but you be nice and you be big about it and you forgive them. So I say, okay, I'll let them off the hook for what's happening inside of me. Imagine that we create a procession of 7.5 billion people. I mean, every person on the earth agrees to come to my door. I shake their hands and say, I forgive you, I forgive you, I forgive. Can I do that 7.5 billion times? Have I done one thing to change the root and the source of the pain that's inside of me?
No.
I've done nothing to do
Right.
If I never learn to change the root and the source of the pain that's inside of me, I get to live the title of my book. Why is this happening to me again?
Yeah.
By the way, the book is out of print at this moment. I'm working on re-editing it, but people can go to my website and download the book free. And the website is whyagain.org. It's kind of like the title of the book, whyagain.org. And there are hundreds of hours of videos, audios, and deeper explanations of the forgiveness process.
So what's a simple process? I love your analogy that you give that holding a grudge against someone is like drinking poison and thinking the other person's going to suffer. So what's a place where somebody can start with the forgiveness that looks within rather than without?
Okay. Well, let's lay a little bit of foundation work, and we'll step right into the core of forgiveness. By the way, it took me over 30 years, almost 35 years, to understand what I'm going to share in the next 3 minutes. Working full-time with the Aramaic first century meanings of Yeshua's words. It took me, now some people might say I'm a slow learner. I don't know. But I have not seen a definition of how to forgive or anyone who has a clue what forgiveness means on planet Earth, aside from the first century Aramaic teachings of Yeshua, and there's an exact and specific definition that matches in A Course in Miracles. But let's lay a foundation. So we've been taught a falsity. We've been taught that we have a set of windows called eyes, and we look out through those eyes and we see what's out there. Now, look at the latest in neuroscience, and the neuroscientists will tell you the brain sees nothing. There's no light goes into the brain. There's no sound goes into the brain. Energetic patterns go into the brain that resonate content in the brain, and that content forms perception, pictures. The pictures we see, the eye is a one-way valve. Information in the form of light energy comes into the eye. Nothing goes out, and nobody sees out through their eyes. Now, that's a shock to the world to realize, and I'm talking now science. Go to the scientists, and they'll say, no, you can't see out through your eyes. But information comes in, and that information causes content to resonate within the mind. And when that content resonates, then it forms literally the world we see, the world of perception. That's why, if you've ever been in a courtroom where 6 different people testified about an accident, you wonder if any 2 of them were at the same accident. Well, why aren't their descriptions all the same? Because no 2 of them were at the same accident. Yes, there was one actuality. There was an accident that occurred, and then there was a perceptual output of 6 different minds. And let's say the person who was prejudiced, let's say, against women drivers, although this woman was clearly in the right green light, traveling properly down the road, and the guy came through the red light, the person who's got the prejudice against women drivers will say, I saw that man or that woman, and she drove through the red light, and she hit him. His perception is going to show him something that's according to how he believes the world is. And that happens for each of us, and that's why, 6 people can testify about an accident, and they've all got a different reality. So there's one actuality that happens in the world, and then each of us has our own reality, the output of our minds. This is one of the foundation pieces of my work and has been for decades. When I came across, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, there's a study that was done by the CIA, and you can actually go to CIA.gov and download a book on the study of intelligence. I'm not sure how many millions they spent of your taxpayer dollars, There's a chapter in this book, it's a free download. There's a chapter in the book called The Study of Perception. And what they're looking to do is to establish the best perceptual possibilities for their intelligence agents. So here's a quote from the CIA's writing on perception. The mind does not record reality. The mind generates reality. Each of us lives within our own reality. So if I recognize the truth of that, then I realize that if my mind is generating a reality based in pain, maybe there's something off base inside of me. And, I'll usually at this stage in the workshop ask the questions, anybody here ever been accused of saying something you never did or doing something that absolutely never happened? And, of course, everybody kind of snickers and puts their hand up. Yeah, I was accused. And then I asked, now, think about one event where you were accused of doing something that you didn't do. And identify what the person who was accusing you, identify what their emotional state was. And guess what? 100% of the time, it's always hostility or fear. Hostility and fear operating inside the human system are indicators that the mind is using corrupt data to generate the world you see. And when the mind utilizes corrupt data to generate the world that you see, then that corrupt data produces a whole picture world that is not the least bit accurate. And so what forgiveness does is it collapses. This is first century Aramaic forgiveness. The actual process of forgiveness collapses perception. It isn't about letting somebody else off the hook because there's a particular energy moving in you. It's about collapsing perceptions based in hostility or fear, and then dissolving the hostility or fear content underneath that perception. So forgiveness is a simple, gentle tool that removes any form of hostility or fear within the system, right down to genetic content, and opens a space for us to once again experience ourselves as who we are, as the active presence of love.
It sounds simple. That is amazing, Michael.
So
basically, so basically, if we can eliminate 100% the hostility and fear within us, we would have correct perception.
Absolutely, yes. And while it's simple, unfortunately, it's not always easy.
Well, yeah, that's what I was.
The resistor comes in.
Yeah, that's what I was getting ready to say. Is I think that goes back to Jesus' meaning of that there's work to be done. And exactly. I know sometimes when I'm working with people, they ask, well, how do you do what you do? And I have to say, well, I have over 25 years of experience doing this. I've put in a lot of work, just like you were talking about understanding Aramaic. You put in 30 years of working to understand it. So it makes sense to you. And I think we can help accelerate people's journey. But yeah, there is still work to be done. There's no magic pill.
But I have $5 in 5 minutes. Can't you tell me everything you've learned in the last 25 years?
Right.
And the ancient teachings, that was called storming the gates. Remember, it said you can't storm the gates of the kingdom. People can understand, there's another place, another way to live. I want to be there yesterday. $5, 5 minutes. Give me the keys. Sorry, you can't have them that way.
Oh, right.
It's a process. You got to do the work.
So then,
go ahead.
Oh, I was really curious, Michael, to ask you what the Aramaic says about reincarnation. Because I know the big, Council of Nicaea took out every reference to reincarnation in the Bible. So I've heard. So I'm curious what Aramaic says about that.
Well, I'll tell you what, we started with a question about how to forgive, and what I'd like to do is finish laying that foundation and do that, and then move into other questions. Does that work?
Oh, sure.
That'll be fine. And also, just to let you know, Michael, we have about 1 minute to maybe give everyone a brief intro, and then we're going to need to go into our break. So I'll alert you when that is, but you got about a minute for just an intro into that.
All right, well, I'll just pop one more piece of information. That'll take about a minute to do, and that is that there's some interesting Harvard research done in the arena of psychology. It's the most quoted research ever in that arena. And what it says is in a time frame where there are 10,000 brain cells firing, 10,000 measurable units of electrical activity moving in the brain, the maximum amount of data that goes into conscious awareness is 9 bits. So we have, as a metaphor, this 9-bit mind. There's a mass of data moving with us, an even larger mass outside of us, and we hone it down to this 9 bits of data. And if it contains hostility or fear, and we know what drives that process, then we can change the whole game, and that's forgiveness. Wow. That should give us about our minute, I think.
Yeah, very good. And yeah, that reminds me of one of my realizations about the senses is that I used to think of the senses as a gateway into our physical experiences. And then I realized there's so much more going out there than what we receive with our senses. They actually act more like filters. They filter down our experience to very specific perceptions. So yeah, I look forward to talking about that when we get back from the break, and we'll pick it up from there. So we are coming up to our break.
Just quickly,
sure.
one second thought.
Okay.
The word that was used by Yeshua when they said, what's most important in the law? He never said love your neighbor. He said have rachma, and it's a filter. So you're right on track there.
Oh, excellent. All right. So you are listening to Spirit's Journey on Truth Frequency Radio, being simulcast on Oneness Talk Radio, and we will see you on the other side.
No hate, no hype, no fear. We are TFR, your protection from deception.
Welcome back from the break. You are listening to Spirit's Journey with Patrick and Catherine Andrews. We are here today with Dr. Michael Ryce. We are coming to you live on Truth Frequency Radio and simulcast on Oneness Talk Radio. I did want to take just a moment to remind you that Truth Frequency Radio is a listener-supported station, so you can take a moment after the show to go to our Spirit's Journey page on Truth Frequency Radio. You can sign up to be a contributor to the station, and you will help provide Spirit's Journey and Truth Frequency Radio to the world, as well as supporting all the other stations. And as a bonus, you will get access to all of the archives for all of the shows on Truth Frequency Radio. So, Michael, we were talking about some very interesting things right before we left, so I'm looking forward to getting back into that.
Great. So we were focusing on or coming up with this idea of moving toward understanding just how forgiveness is done. And so recognizing that in a time frame, and it's about a 25th of a second, where 10,000 brain cells are firing. There are 10,000 measurable units of electrical activity moving in the brain. The maximum amount of data that goes into conscious awareness is 9 bits. Very tiny little bit. Now, obviously, something must determine which 9 bits of information your mind is going to use at any given moment. There's got to be a recruiter there that recruits content. If I, let's say I'm a basketball player in high school and I want to get a college scholarship, what am I going to do? I'm going to make sure I get into a game where the recruiters are there from all these universities, and hopefully one of these recruiters is going to pull me. There are 100 students out there. One of these recruiters is going to pull me to be part of the final team. Well, if people understood what recruits data in their minds into perception, which causes this individual piece of data to be used rather than that piece of data. Yesterday I said, I love you, I cherish you, I will love you forever. And then you gave me the look. What happened? This person now has difficulty seeing anything they even care for about this person because the mind is being filtered and it's using different data than it was yesterday when it was saying how much I cherish you. Now, in order to understand what the recruiter is, there's a question to ask. And the question is, sort of a comment question. Notice that in your life generally, unless you're just a miserable person, you're pretty happy with most people, unless they're doing something that violates a goal that you have for them. If there's something you've been hanging out with Charlie for years and everything is cool and everything is good and you have fun and great guy, and then one day that $10,000 he was supposed to bring to you today and pay you, he didn't bring. Now what happens? Different perception, different units of perceptual memory are used to build this picture of Charlie. And Charlie shows up deserving your perhaps rage at where's my money, or your intimidation that you better get my money, whatever happens to be going on. And yesterday, Charlie was your best friend. What happened? You will notice that you're never upset with someone, again, unless you're just a generally miserable person, you're never upset with someone unless they're violating a goal that you have for them.
Interesting.
So
Notice
kind of like
a decent person, everybody's pretty cool as long as they're fulfilling and sort of matching all of your goals.
So is that kind of like, the whole deal with expectations in a marriage where, you're dating, everything goes along, and then all of a sudden you get married. And of course, in both people's minds, they have expectations or goals. And then all of a sudden the person isn't filling those expectations, and then there's problems.
Well, I would shift the language just a little bit there. An expectation is not actually the same thing as a goal. A goal is something that I am committed to doing, or I have a commitment to making sure somebody else does. An expectation is just, I have an they told me it was going to be sunny this afternoon. If I go out and it's raining, I'm not going to be in a fit of rage because it's not about a goal for the weather to be sunny. It's about, I have an expectation. So expectation kind of waters down the process. To engage in the actual forgiveness process, as it was taught in the first century Aramaic, what you need to do is locate the goal, the specific constructive result you wanted from the object of attention of your hostility or fear in any given situation. This is one of the first and most important, one of the early and most important steps in the forgiveness process. So what is it I want from this individual? And my offering is that our goals are the recruiters that determine which data gets into perceptual awareness in any given moment. And so when I realize it's goals that drive perception, if I know what to do with the goal, I can collapse perception based in corrupt data, perception based in hostility or fear. How do I do that? What do I do in order to do that? Well, it's interesting. In the Aramaic language, the word forgive is shabag or shabak. And that word has been translated as forgive, but it actually means to cancel. The core of forgiveness is that if you find yourself in some form of hostility or fear, it's because you've got a goal that's caused your mind to utilize data inside of you based in hostility or fear to construct the world you see, to construct the world of perception. If you cancel that goal, you remove the recruiter, the perception collapses in on itself. Now, when it collapses in on itself, it gives you access to the underlying data. It gives you access to what's at the root of that hostility or fear. And sometimes the root of that hostility or fear can be generations old. And I suggest that people utilize a visualization. Everybody got to see over and over and over again the towers go down at 9/11. Those towers were hit, and they collapsed free fall speed in their own footprint. And they landed right in the center of their root. When you cancel a goal, what happens is that 9 bits of data that occupies the conscious awareness collapses in on itself, and it creates an opening into what's in the footprint, what's underlying, or what's in the unconscious mind. If you go back to Yeshua 2,000 years ago, he says, you must forgive from your heart the wrongs of your brother. And, listening to the Greek translation of that, it sounds like I'm supposed to be a bleeding heart and forgive my brother, let my brother off the hook, because there's pain moving inside of me. And, of course, that's not going to change the pain that's moving inside of me. So it's pretty ridiculous. Now, we have been able to translate the word heart out of the ancient Aramaic until just a few decades ago, because there was no concept of the unconscious mind in the Western world until Freud rediscovered the unconscious. He actually got a Nobel Prize for it. And he didn't discover the unconscious any more than fly in the air, but he did rediscover it. If you go back to the Aramaic and you have the eyes to see and the ears to hear, that is, you have the brain cells, then you realize that word heart, you must forgive from your heart. Take care of the heart, for out of it are the issues in life. Notice they didn't say take care of the other guy. They said take care of the energetic patterns that are held within your own heart, your own unconscious, because they're the energetic patterns that will reach out in the metaphysical world, in the world of quantum waves, and bring about the results that you're going to experience. And if you find those results disturbing, the way you access the unconscious, and when most people first start to access their unconscious dynamics, they're like, well, but no, Michael, you just said that was going on inside of me, you suspect, and that couldn't be, because if that were going on inside of me, I'd know it. It's like, no, that's why it's called the unconscious, because we don't know it. So what happens is when I cancel the goal, just take any given circumstance where I'm in upset and specifically identify what's the constructive result. If I've got a kid that's being verbally abusive to me, the constructive result I want from the kid is not for him to stop being verbally abusive, which is what the average person would say my goal was. We're very, very cognizant of what we don't want, and we tend to create our lives oftentimes out of what we don't want. Oh, I was in one of those abusive relationships. I don't ever want somebody who's ever going to yell at me and be abusive again. Guess what frequency you just sent out into the quantum world that's going to pull somebody in, and what that somebody is going to be capable of doing, being abusive. That's how creation works. And so when I cancel the goal, my perception collapses, and I can drop into the hidden part of my mind that perhaps has been going on for 100 generations. Now, metaphorically, if I have, and I don't mean this absolutely literally, but if I have a 9-bit mind, for comparison's sake, and there are 10,000 brain cells firing inside of me, and at the root of that are 100 generations of this particular trauma, whatever it is, how do I ever process that? How do I ever do that? Well, Yeshua taught 2,000 years ago about a feminine elemental force that resided inside of us that in Aramaic was called Rucha Dikudsha. Mm-hmm. Those words were translated by the Greeks as the Holy Spirit. There's no such thing referred to in Aramaic as a disembodied spirit being, however. The definition of those words in Aramaic are a feminine elemental force in us that, when invited into activity, undoes the effects of our errors and teaches us the truth.
Wow.
So we might say the super processor. Mm-hmm. So I'm in hostility because Charlie didn't give me my 10 grand. I think that's what my mind tells me I'm in hostility about, but the truth is I'm in hostility because there's hostility in me. I can use it for Charlie or Bill or Harry or Mary or my favorite person or my most hated person and say, they made me. I mean, the whole world has been trained to live in denial. You made me mad. You made me sad. You hurt me. You really have a problem. Ever shout that at somebody? For those folks to ask the question, if they're the one with the problem, why are you the one with the pain? Something about that doesn't make sense. If they're the one with the problem, obviously they'd be the one with the pain. If you have pain, maybe you have a problem and you don't know it because you live in denial. And denial is the act of thinking or speaking as though something outside of me is the cause of what's moving inside of me. And it causes my perceptual system to become distorted because I dissociate. When I go into denial, I have to dissociate from the part of me that's really causing this energy to move. And once I dissociate from it, that part of my mind is impervious to new choices. I'm now stuck with it. What forgiveness does is allows me to collapse into that and invite this, and we might call it in our modern computer language, we might call it the super processor. So once I cancel the goal, then I ask that power, whatever term, it's been called the higher power, the superconscious, the subconscious, the primordial X, God, Holy Spirit, higher power, whatever words you use. If I invite that to go to work in me, what happens is that power knows how to process me right down on my genetic toes and remove content that doesn't belong. And forgiveness is about removal. It's not about letting other people off the hook. So the simplicity of the forgiveness process is this. It took me over 30 years to learn this. If I'm in pain or upset, there's an energy in me that doesn't belong. That's what's moving in me. The thing that's causing it to move in me and enter into my perceptual awareness and make somebody else the object of my hostility or fear is that I've loaded a goal for that object of attention that causes my mind to use that data to build my perception of them. When I cancel the goal, when I get rid of the recruiter, that collapses back into itself. And as it drops into those deeper parts of the mind, it gives me access to the hidden parts of my mind. When I can keep that pathway open and I can bring those hidden parts that contain perhaps generations old hostilities and fears, when I can bring that forward in the presence of active love, then those things dissolve. That's forgiveness. The dissolution of all hostility or fear within the human organism so that this human form is a fit place for that created essence that each of us is, love, to incarnate and express through.
Wow, yeah, I really love that idea that goes beyond just expectations. I think especially in this country that it's a pretty common idea that sometimes we have expectations for others, but I really like how you take that a step further and say, no, there's really a step further that we often go, when you're talking about creating a goal for another person, that you're actually making a commitment to how you expect them to behave. Another way that I learned about this in metaphysics is coming to the realization that we cannot control others. And so the more energy that we invest in trying to control others, the more unhappy we often become because they fail to live up to what we want them to do because they have their own mind, their own desires. And so as long as, like what you said, when they're doing what we want them to do, everything's great. But then as soon as they come up with an idea of their own, oh my gosh, they're going off and doing their own thing. Why aren't they doing my thing? And so I really can relate to what you're talking about in terms of that need to turn within and be responsible for what's within us. And, because it's like ultimately it comes down to we are the only one who can make that change. We can't make other people change to what we want. It's like if there's something that we want to change, we've got to look within and make that change inside ourselves. Right.
Well, one refinement I'd offer to what you just said is that I'm not upset because they're off doing their own thing, whatever the form of upset is. I'm upset because that upset is in me. And my goal has caused my mind to use that upset to build my perception of them.
Yeah, I like that description.
And it's my upset that needs to be cleaned out. The whole world is stuck in this game of denial, and you made me, you made me, you made me. And literally, whenever we utilize that language, in essence, what we're saying to the mind, there are 10,000 brain cells firing, 9 bits come to awareness. It's been estimated in the same time frame there are approximately 25 trillion bits of information potentially available. So out of a 25 trillion bit world, 10,000 brain cells fire, and I get to see 9 bits of data. But the 9 bits of data that I get to see come from the contents of my mind. But what happens is if I put a goal in for Charlie, then my mind, and Charlie comes along and doesn't fulfill that goal, Charlie's behavior resonates that part of me that holds that pain, and I use that pain content to build my pained image of Charlie. Literally, the body that I see coming up and causing my pain comes from the content of my own mind. There's no body out there called Charlie. There's an energy field if we could see who he is, but bodies are simply images in the mind. And each image that we see always tells us more about the contents of our own mind than the world we think we're looking at.
So continuing on with this idea of the goals. So if somebody does have a goal in life and then, the other it's attached to another person and they don't fulfill it. So is part of the learning that they have to learn how to not depend on or attach a goal to somebody else, or always just, forget the goal. But if it's something important to them, do they need to find another way using their own resources rather than attaching it to a person?
That wouldn't be my take. It isn't that there's anything wrong with the goal. If I'm married, I have a wife, she has goals for me, I have goals for her. We have a wonderful relationship, and we are there fulfilling each other's goals. And or if there's a place where there's a conflict in goals, our standard is, who's it most important to? Is this, like on a scale of 1 to 10, is this a 9 for you or 2? It's a 2 for me. Oh, it's a 9 for you? Okay, I'll do it. Or vice versa. Perfectly fine to have goals. It's not that there's a problem with the goal. The problem is that when I load the goal into my mind, it recruits data based on hostility or fear inside of me. And I need to clean that up. When I finish cleaning that up, when I free myself of that hostility or fear, I can go back to the same circumstance with the same person and the same goal, and it's wonderful. I mean, the goal is, I want you to cherish me. Well, that's a reasonable goal for everybody to have, for everybody on the planet. The only time it's a problem to have that goal is when I load it into my mind and it recruits corrupt data in my mind, data based in hostility and fear, and builds a picture world where I blame the picture for my hostility and fear. So it's perfectly fine once you go through a forgiveness process. We have an app. Actually, it's the world's first forgiveness app. And if people go to their app store, whether it's an Android phone or an iPhone, if you go to your app store and type in the words HeartLand, Aramaic forgiveness, and some people get concerned about the spelling of Aramaic, but if you just put in the RA, it's going to show up in your store. And just click and download. It's free. It's totally private. The app, if you check it out, only asks for permission to use the internet. Otherwise, you can go through the whole forgiveness process. There are actually 3 different applications within HeartLand Aramaic Forgiveness app. There are 2 forms of what we call the wake-up sheet of the forgiveness process, a simple one and a more complex one, a deeper one. And then there's a game for introducing children. It's called the Drag-On-Kling-On game for introducing children to forgiveness. And or people can go to our website, whyagain.org, and way up, like the tippy-top line, right up at the top on the left-hand side, there's a link that says Start Here. If you click that Start Here button, it'll walk you through a series of links that will explain the whole forgiveness process. Myself, and by the way, Dr. Tim Hayes says to say hello. He hasn't talked to you guys in years, but he does my radio show with me. We actually just expanded the show. We've been doing a show 5 days a week for 8 years now. And Tim has been part of that since the initiation. And just a few weeks ago, actually, we decided to expand it out. Instead of an hour a day, it's 2 hours a day. Central Time, it's from 11 to 1 o'clock. And Tim does the first hour. I do the second hour. And so if you go to our website and click that top line, Start Here, there are links where either Tim or myself or my wife Jeannie have walked people step by step through the whole forgiveness process. So there's a wake-up sheet that people can download for free from the site, and then can go to the archives of the radio show, and there's a section there under that particular link that says, that's particular radio shows. And I think we've got 16 or maybe it's 17 different 1-hour shows now where we've totally walked somebody right through. So there are at least 16 different custom explanations of the forgiveness process, working with different real life people in real life circumstances. And so each one is instructive from a slightly different angle in how this forgiveness process is done. And so that's available on our website. We've got, over 2,000 hours of archives of radio shows. They're all free if anybody wants to download those. And of course, 5 days a week from 11 till 1 Central Time, people can call into our show. It's on Blog Talk Radio. They can do it. There's a link on our website to listen to the show, or they can call into the show. Most people have unlimited long distance these days, and most people then just call into the show, and the number is 563-999-3581. If people call that number, they'll be listening to the show. And if they have a question, they just push 1, raises a little hand up in the control panel. Jeannie usually runs the control panel and introduces them, and we're having a conversation. So we're there to make this technology. There aren't many people that are going to take the time to really understand this tool of forgiveness. As I say, it took me 30 plus years to comprehend what I've just explained in the last 20 minutes, to understand how the mind works, how the physics of the mind works, how perception works, to assemble that in a way that makes sense. And so that's all on our website. There's also on our website, on the right-hand side of all the pages, are all of our social media links. And if you go to our YouTube channel and type in the word PowerPoint, that PowerPoint explains. There's a 23-minute PowerPoint that explains what I just explained, the whole forgiveness process, that gives people a visual and walks them through it. So any way we can support people in understanding and using that tool, that's the whole reason for everything that we do and have done over the last almost 50 years.
Yeah, I know that when you used to come into Chicago, the live events were amazing. And I know you're not currently touring, but people are going to be able to also go see you live in Missouri at your HeartLand Center there. And so we've got about 30 seconds left here. And so definitely say hi to Dr. Hayes for us. We miss seeing Tim. It's been quite a while since we've talked to him too. Did you have any last thoughts here before we go?
Well, one thought is I'll have Tim call you if you want. You might want to interview him. He's been teaching this work now and uses it in his practice for over 15 years. And so he'd have a different perspective. And otherwise, take the tools, put them to work, and, I guess we kind of filled the hour up with the conversation about forgiveness. And I feel like that's a really big accomplishment to have gotten that all into, the 54 minutes or so that we've had. And I guess that doesn't leave us much room for any other thoughts or questions. So we can do this again. I'm always available. Anything I can do to take the tools and make them available, I'm up for it. So all right. Anytime you want to fill a space, I'm here to do it.
All right. Well, thank you for being on the show. We really love having you, and I'm sure that we could do several other shows and continue delving deeper into this amazing material. We love having you with us, so please connect with us on Facebook at Spirits Journey Radio. Be sure to like our page. You can also visit our website at intuitiveschool.com. This has been Spirits Journey on Truth Frequency Radio. I'm Patrick.
And I'm Catherine. Have an awesome week, everyone. We'll catch you next time.